Welcome to another episode of Jay Leno's Garage. We're going to be talking about steam cars again today. This is one of the very last Stanley steam cars. This is a 1922 model, and quite frankly, they weren't very good cars. I mean, they're fun, but why you'd buy one of these instead of a Model T or a gas car by 1922, I don't know why people did. Probably because maybe it had a steam background. Maybe they were a steam engineer. Maybe they had steam tractors and locomotives and things like that. And they were just more comfortable with steam. But this is basically the same car as the other Stanleys in the videos, the 1910s. The motor is basically the same, except with just another 2,000 pounds of weight. In 1908, 9, 10, when they were non-condensing cars and they were very light, God, they were fast. They'd go 60, 70 miles an hour and you could zip around in them. By this time, they were big and heavy with the same 20 horsepower engine. 45 miles an hour, just about the end of the world on this car. As you can see, these were painted with a brush. They weren't sprayed. That's why you see brush strokes in it. It's been restored fairly authentically. You have your wood wheels. You got brakes in the rear only. You have a generator that runs off your rear axle. Let's show you the boiler. There's your boiler there. I mean, it's a very attractive car. It's a pretty car, as you can see. Has a lot of unusual gauges. I'll explain those in a minute. And don't get me wrong, these were a lot of fun, but they were not really practical. If you had to go somewhere in a hurry, then you didn't have to be there in a hurry. That's basically the way it is. As a hobbyist and as a fun car to fool around with and take people for rides, it's great fun. As a practical car back in 1922, why you would buy this instead of a Model T or any gas engine, it's just beyond me. But you'll see what you have to go through as we fire it up. Let's walk around the car. Like most Stanleys, you have two tanks. You have your gas tank for your fuel, and you have another tank for your pilot fuel. Basically, the way it works is liquid gasoline runs through a series of tubes. The pilot heats the tubes so they get nice and hot, and as soon as the gasoline hits the hot tube, it becomes a gas, a vapor. It is then under pressure forced into the boiler to heat the water to make the steam. Just to give you an idea what you have to go through to run one of these things. First thing I'm going to do is open this valve here. Now this valve goes directly into the boiler. I'm going to get a hose and fill the boiler with water. That's your first step. Okay, now as you see, the water goes all over the place, making a huge mess. Well, let's see. All right, now we check our gauge here. This will tell us how much water we have in the boiler. We want to fill that to about halfway. Now that the boiler's got enough water in it, we go to step 2, which is I open this here to let air flow through the boiler before we fire it up. I'm going to shut the hood. We come around to this side. The one nice thing that this has over the other Stanleys is you have an air tank that can provide air pressure to both your pilot fuel and your main fuel tank. What I'm going to do now is this red one is pilot fuel pressure. Okay, I'm going to open that up, bring that up just a bit. See it moving up? Okay. That's about what I want, 30 pounds in there. And I'll bring up the main fuel as well. Then you have your hand pump here. You pump this, and this will pump up your fuel pressure. You pump that up by hand, and then once you're moving, as in the other Stanleys, it'll pump up automatically. Following this, it's a lot of work to get going. Now we have to light our pilot. If you've watched the other Stanley videos, first thing you do is you heat up your pilot down here like this. And hopefully it doesn't blow up in your face like it did the last time. There you go. There you go. All right, now I'm going to try and light the pilot. I stick that in the pilot hole. I open the valve, which allows pilot fuel to go in. Let's see. See that fire burning in that hole in there? We let that get everything nice and toasty for about, 10 minutes. You go, you have a cup of coffee, visit with your family, spend some quality time with the kids. When you come back, she should be ready to drive. Although we still have to put water in the boiler. Well, what they would do in the old days, actually, to be fair, guys would leave their pilot burning all night long. You might burn the barn down. So when you came in the morning, the car was hot and ready to go. So we are starting from dead cold. So that's a little bit of a disadvantage. What you do here is you pump this up, and that will pump up your fuel gauge here. You want to get about 140 pounds in that. We're up to about 110, getting up there, 120. Okay, now this gets complicated. Start the car on pilot fuel. You also have a pyrometer here on the dashboard. You always know your fire is going on. What I'm going to do is open a valve under here, shoot some hexane, which is the pilot fuel, into the boiler, let that ignite, get everything hot before you introduce the main fuel, the gasoline. This gets complicated. You hear it? You hear the hexane fuel. And now I'm going to try and open the main burner valve. Open your drip valve. What your drip valve does is it opens a little doorway in the cylinder so water can come out. You know, you can't compress water. You'll hydraulic it. Steam can push a piston, but you can compress steam, but you can't compress water. So what you want to do is get all your water out of your cylinders. That's what I'm doing now. Why, we should be ready to go in 15 minutes. Ooh, a lot of heat. I'll close this door to keep the heat in. It's a lot of work, and you gotta love these things. What we're waiting for now is steam pressure. Once we're moving the cylinder lubrication needle, see, once it starts pumping, you'll see that move up as it pumps lubricant in and around the steam engine. What I'm doing here basically is heating up 15 gallons of water like a tea kettle. And I can hear the pipes starting to rattle as the steam moves through it. I got the emergency brake on. In a minute we'll open the radiator cap and fill it with water. We'll be ready to go by nightfall. Okay, we're starting to get some steam. I'm going to close the throttle. This is the throttle right here. What I'm doing there is getting all the water out of the cylinders. And I'm going to pull forward so we can put water in the radiator. See if I got anything. Not quite enough to pull forward. Not quite enough steam to pull forward yet. I mean, this is ridiculous. Sometimes your fuel nozzle gets clogged and you have to tweak it with this. So you stick it in there and sometimes it'll blow back in your face, so you have to be careful. Hey George, give me a little push. I'm surprised the gas car's got a foothold at all. Okay, we're starting to get some steam. Now you know you have enough water when it comes out the bottom. See the water coming out? We put the cap on, look at that. We are ready to go in under half an hour. Huh? How about that? As you can see, ready to pull away. We got 400 pounds of steam pressure. Open our throttle a little bit. Here we go. Something else you need to do with these old cars, especially wooden wheels, is you always hose the wheels down a little bit. Some guys would park them partly in a stream so the wood would absorb some of the water and tighten up a little bit. Not much of a problem in New England or someplace where it's humid, but out here in California, the wood wheels would creak and sometimes crack and break. See, in these cars, you don't do burnouts. You impress people by just your ability to just pull away. And once we reach the heady speed of 18 miles an hour, our ammeter should kick in. See, now that the car is rolling, I don't have to pump anymore. It's pumping automatically itself. Let's see what happens here. Look at that, look at that, I'm charging, my battery's charging. The world is great. Once everything gets really hot, when you've driven this car for like 45 minutes to an hour, and all the pipes get really hot, as soon as the water hits them, it turns to steam, and you get a lot more power. Right now, everything is just a little bit cold. You know, in a gasoline car, you try to get all the heat out of the engine. In a steam car, whenever you see heat escaping, you try to seal it in. You want to conserve as much steam as possible, so any chance you get a chance to close the throttle, you do it and you coast. See, now we're coming to a red light. I close the throttle and I coast for as long as I can, just trying to build up some steam pressure so I can pull away from the next light. You know, a lot of guys are afraid of these because they think they're going to blow up, and They don't really blow up. They catch fire, but that's not blowing up. See, in the old Stanleys, those were non-condensing cars, meaning the steam just went up the back in a huge plume of steam. In the condensing car, it uses the water over and over again. The steam goes through, hits the condenser, what looks like a radiator, but it's actually a condenser, hits the cold air, turns into water again, and you reuse it. Now you see my cylinder is pumping lubricant in there. Remember that was off before? Now as it's moving, it shoots a dollop of steam oil into the cylinders to lubricate, because as you know, water is not a lubricant. And now we're rolling along pretty good. We're hitting 20, 25 miles an hour. Gotta remember when these cars were built, there were no super highways, there were barely any paved roads. So 25 miles an hour was about right. And you had a lot of torque. You know, steam engine can climb anything. There's no clutch, there's no transmission, there's no magneto or distributor to mess with, there's no choke, you didn't have to crank it and break your arm. But as I said, it's basically the same as the 1910 Stanley, just with a big heavy body and a generator and a condenser and electric lights and a battery, and you can see how it affects the performance. This was just an old-fashioned car the minute it left the factory. By 1922, steam was more than over, and only a few of the old guys hung on to it. You know, the Stanley is probably indicative of a lot of things that happened to the automotive industry. You had a product that was great, but by not improving it and just making the same thing year after year, you find yourself in an economic slump as more progressive automobiles and manufacturers pass you. You know, like we here in the United States continue to manufacture SUVs and pickup trucks when clearly things were going towards more fuel-efficient vehicles. You know, I'm starting to look the part of one of these guys that would actually own one of these things. That's the scary part. What you want to do is blow down the boiler, get all the scale out of it when you finish running. See that? Only took an hour to go 4 miles. Not bad. See you next week.